Good morning or good afternoon, depending if you are second or fourth period. You should have just gotten done with your Three Gorges Dam editorial. Feel free to turn that in if you haven't already. You should be finished with that. Now you should be working on doing the guided notes over ancient China. We are moving on to section 2. So we're no longer going to talk about geography, but we are going to talk about getting to the history of China. And we're going to start off treating China kind of like we did ancient Egypt. We consider it one of the early river civilizations, meaning it was a civilization that developed along a river. Just like Egypt developed along the Nile, ancient China is going to develop along the Huang River or the Yellow River. If you look up towards the front of the room, you can see those posters that I have over the 4 early river valley civilizations that we're going to study this year, ancient China being the second one. So as you can see, we're looking at this map of the ancient world. We've already covered ancient Egypt. Now we're going to go on to ancient China. This is a great timeline that compares excuse me, the 4 early river valley civilizations. And you'll notice with ancient China that it began as the last of those early river civilizations. But look when it finishes. It continues to the present day. A lot of modern China is based off of this early civilization. China is the longest lasting civilization on the planet, which makes China really interesting. So you should have downloaded the guided notes. As we're going through this, it's fill in the blank, just like the past ones have been, just like we've always done all year. If I'm going too fast for you, feel free to pause the video, and you can get the blanks filled in, and then pick up whenever you're ready to move on. So take advantage of being able to pause this. Like I said when I showed you the timeline, China is the last of the 4 ancient river valley civilizations to develop, but it's the longest lasting. It still lasts today. It began around 2000 before Common Era. And kind of put it into perspective, through the rest of the world, Egypt had already built the pyramids. In fact, pharaohs were no longer building pyramids. They kind of fell out of style. The pyramids were old by the time China developed. And Egypt was already this massive civilization. Hopefully, as we're going through this PowerPoint and through this section, you'll realize that there are a lot of similarities between ancient Egypt and ancient China, especially between all 4 of those civilizations. We're going to see a lot of similarities throughout the year. Let's talk about the Huang River. Okay, you should have already put this on your map activity that you did last week, but around 5000 BCE, so that would be 7,000 years ago. Nomads, people who traveled from place to place searching for resources, stopped and began to farm around the Huang River. And just like the Nile River, the Huang River provided a lot of necessities for life. Provided fertile soil and irrigation, transportation for trading, mud for making buildings and making tools, and fishing for food, and of course plentiful drinking water. Sometimes you'll hear me refer to the Huang River as the Yellow River because there's this really rich soil, a nutrient-rich soil called loess. You can actually find it in America too, and it has this really yellow hue. It looks yellow. So because there's so much of this really valuable soil in the river sometimes looks yellow, and I've got some pictures to actually show you that. These are pictures from the Huang River, and you can see it, especially this picture on the left, when you get so much of that rich silt in the water, which is awesome for farming. The river looks yellow, and you can see that. China gets divided into dynasties, which is one of our bellwork words this week. A dynasty is a series of rulers that come from the same family. So it gets passed down from father to son, father to son, father to son. During the early dynasties, the ruler is called a king, but eventually, starting next week, we'll start referring to him as an emperor, not a king. Ancient China organized itself into really small kind of kingdoms that were always fighting with each other, And the Shang was the first family to unite all the areas around the Huang River that were Chinese into one empire. And that's why they get considered the first dynasty. The social structure of ancient China. We've talked about how every civilization develops an organized way of grouping the people that live in their society. And they organize it in what we call a social pyramid, which is, again, one of our bellwork words this week, where you have the king at the top and you have everybody else in the middle, or below. The king is said to have supernatural powers. And just like ancient China, where the pharaoh was kind of seen as a god on earth, in ancient China, the king and then eventually the empire is seen the same way. This kind of makes ancient China a theocracy, just like ancient Egypt was. Right? A theocracy where you believe your government is ruled by your religion. So having your king be a god on earth, it means that your government is ruled by religion. Here's the social structure, the social pyramid that we've been talking about. Social pyramids show you who is at the top, who's the most important, the king. It also shows you where the majority of people were. So the least important people were poor farmers. They worked their whole life just trying to make enough food to survive. But even though poor farmers are the lowest, they're the majority. Most people living in ancient Egypt were poor farmers. There are a few people who are skilled workers, like blacksmiths, people who made things out of metal, or craftsmen who made pots and pans and dishes and bowls. And then at the top, you had the king and the people who worked for him, the warlords. Just like ancient Egypt, ancient China developed its own advanced writing system that's actually a lot like hieroglyphics. We know a ton about ancient China's writing system because it's very, very similar to Chinese today. The written language of China is called calligraphy. They use these really stylized symbols, and we'll talk about this when I get back, and I'll kind of show you some videos of how calligraphy is used. But it's this kind of artistic technique where words, thoughts, and sounds are shown as symbols. So where we use letters to spell out a word, Chinese writing uses symbols to stand for different words. And many of these symbols that first appeared 6,000 years ago are still used today in Chinese writing. Here's a great example. Here's Chinese calligraphy, and this is modern Chinese calligraphy. This is what it would look like today, but you can see these different symbols mean the word below it. So like this is the symbol for daughter, or this is the symbol for friend. So when you're reading these symbols together, the different symbols like form sentences and form coherent thoughts. The last thing we're going to talk about is the coolest part of ancient China. And you're going to actually do an activity with this tomorrow after your bellwork quiz. But in ancient China, they used these things called oracle bones. And they were used to tell the future. They were made out of tortoise shells, and they were made out of the shoulder blades of ox. And what would happen is the king would have his priests write a message on it, saying like, is it going to rain this week? Or am I going to win this next battle? And then the bones would be heated to a really high temperature until they cracked. And then his priests would take those cracks and interpret what the cracks meant to tell the king's future. It was like an old-timey magic 8-ball. Those magic 8 balls, you ask a question, you shake, and it says, undoubtedly, or not today. That's how oracle bones were used. The activity you're going to do tomorrow talks about how these oracle bones were discovered and what's interesting about them. Here's some pictures of oracle bones, and this is why oracle bones are important. Oracle bones are covered in these questions. They're covered in the writing of ancient China. So how do we know what the ancient Chinese writing system was? We look at these oracle bones. These oracle bones which have been found all over China. Originally, people thought these were the bones of dragons, and they were treated like medicine in China. But then eventually one guy was looking at these, and he went, hey, you know what? These symbols look a lot like the symbols we use today. maybe this is a writing system. And through some research and archaeology, they discovered that what these oracle bones were used for, and they realized that this was writing. So these oracle bones, which are found all over China, all over the ground in China, are how we know and how we can read ancient Chinese. These are a lot like the Rosetta Stones that was found in ancient Egypt, which allowed us to read hieroglyphics, except for where there's only one Rosetta Stone, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of oracle bones. Whoops. Yep, that's all we're going to cover for today. So that's all you need to fill out. And like I said, if you fell behind or if I was going too fast, go back, rewind, pause on the different slides that you need to. Take your time with this. If you don't get all the way done, don't worry about it. We're going to finish this on Tuesday, and we can go over some of the stuff next Tuesday that you didn't quite get today. All right, so have a great couple days. If you have any questions or you have any concerns, feel free to send me an email. I don't know how fast I'll be able to respond, but I'll get back to you as fast as I can. Have a great couple days, and I'll see you guys next week.